Theodore.
There's another story coming right up, and you can always learn more about Theodore Tugboat on the internet. Find us through PBS Online.
Pushing and a pulling in the great big harbor, in the great big world is so much fun. So many brand new things to discover. Waking with the sun, gotta get the job done. Oh, Theodore and Emily, Theodore, Hank and George, and the harbor master too.
Hello. The chief harbor master's coming to inspect my office today. And everything has got to look shipshape. Extra shipshape for the chief harbor master. Oh, my. I've no time for that now. I've really got to hurry. Oh, dear. Oh, this office looks worse now than when I started to clean it up. What am I going to do? George would know what to do. Yes, George. You see, George was in a hurry the other day. A big hurry. You know, I don't think I've ever told you that story before. Late one afternoon, Theodore and Hank were helping George dock Igloo, the oil tanker. As soon as they were finished, George roared off, and Theodore and Hank followed along after him. You see, even though the sun was already beginning to set over the big harbor, it was a busy day, and the tug still had another container ship to move out of the harbor. "Look," said Hank, "there's Blue Nose." Theodore and Hank slowed to watch Blue Nose, the sailing ship, pass. "She's so beautiful," smiled Theodore. "Make way," honked George. "We're in a hurry." And then he roared right past Blue Nose, almost cutting her off. "George sure is in a big hurry today," Theodore said to Hank. And then they set off again after George. Sometimes it was hard keeping up with the big tug. Theodore and Hank arrived at the container terminal, where Claire, the container ship, was waiting for them. George was already vrooming his engine and blowing up smoke. He couldn't wait to get going. Well, seeing George in such a hurry made Hank and Theodore feel like they should be in a hurry too. And without even thinking about it, they began to vroom their engines. "It's late," announced George. "We have to get Claire out of the harbor." Well, Theodore knew it was getting late, and they had some tough tugging ahead. But he also knew that whenever you're leaving the harbor, you should always find out if it's clear sailing, and if there are any storms or other ships coming. "Maybe we should ask Theodore if it's all clear up ahead," Theodore called to George. "There's no time for that today," replied George, moving along. "Hurry up!" George began to turn Claire away from her dock, without even waiting for Theodore and Hank to button their tow ropes onto her. "How come we always have to hurry when we work with George?" said Hank, huffing to catch up. A few moments later, Theodore, the safety tug, came floating by on his regular harbor safety patrol. He passed the empty dock, surprised to see the tugs had left without checking with him. Theodore turned on his special equipment and listened carefully. He said. "No storms, or ships that I can hear coming. It appears to be clear sailing," he decided. Meanwhile, beyond the calm waters of the big harbor, Constance, the Coast Guard ship, was doing her safety patrol out on the ocean. And what she saw out there almost made her gasp out loud. Chunks of dangerous ice were heaving through the water in a massive ice flow, pushed along by the powerful ocean currents. Chunks of ice that could hurt even the strongest ship. Right away, she sent the message. The dispatcher heard it, and lightning fast, because there wasn't a moment to lose, he sent it along to Theodore. The message seemed to freeze Theodore's engine oil. "Danger! Ice flow approaching. Stop all ships." "Claire!" Theodore said to himself, turning back to the empty dock. Well, at that moment, George, Theodore, and Hank were just passing Blandford, the last marker buoy near the harbor entrance, when they heard a faraway sound. "That sounds like Foduck," said Theodore. "Probably just the wind," George called back. "Anyway, we can't stop now, even if we wanted to." Theodore knew George was right. George was pulling Claire so fast, they would be well out of the harbor before they could even slow down. "There's something in the water," Theodore called. "Probably just fog rolling in," shouted George. "Let's hurry up and get out onto the ocean." And then, instead of slowing down, he roomed his engine to speed up even faster. Theodore tried to see through the dusky light. There, heading toward the side of the ship. What was that? The first chunk of ice hit George and knocked the steam out of him. "Oof!" he grunted, and it was more in surprise than pain. "Ice floe!" Theodore shouted as the ice began closing in all around them. "Stop! Turn around!" Theodore blasted his warning whistle. But just as George had said, the giant ship was moving so fast, there was no way to stop her. "No!" cried Hank. A huge boulder of ice slammed into Claire with a terrible crack. "Oh!" Claire groaned. The large ship shuddered from stem to stern. As more ice crashed into her, the tugs struggled to hold her steady. Now they didn't know whether to be more afraid for Claire or themselves. It seemed to take forever until the ice floe floated past. And then the ocean was silent again. Silent and still. The tugs knew they had to take Claire back to the harbor and have her checked for damage at the repair dock. "Let's get going right away," George shouted. He began nosing Claire back towards the harbor. "Stop! You can't take that ship into the harbor!" The tugs were surprised to see Foduck floating towards them at full speed. "We need to see if she's been damaged," gasped Foduck, out of breath. The tugs floated around to see that, sure enough, an ice boulder had ripped a seam in Claire's side. Worse, oil was beginning to trickle out. Soon, the oil might start spilling out into the water. "If you take her back, she might leak oil all over the harbor," continued Foduck. The tugboats knew that that would be a disaster. The big harbor would have to be closed. "But," said Hank slowly, "if we can't leave her here, and we can't take her back into the harbor, then what can we do?" "Maybe," said Theodore, thinking hard. "Maybe we can take Claire back to the big harbor, but leave the oil here." "Leave the oil here?" repeated Foduck. "In the water?" said Hank. No, not in the water," said Theodore. "In Igloo." Foduck stayed behind to warn other ships away from Claire. George was speeding in the lead as Theodore and Hank pulled Igloo, the oil tanker, out to join Claire. "What are we going to do when we get there, Theodore?" asked Hank. "It's simple," said Theodore. "Igloo is made to hold oil. All we have to do is pass Igloo's oil hose to Claire, and then she can pump all her oil into Igloo." "So there'll be no more oil left to leak," said Hank. "What a great plan, Theodore." "The most important thing is," Theodore started to say. But before Theodore could finish his sentence, George vroomed his engine again. "No time to talk, let's just do it." George began to move Igloo into position alongside the leaking container ship, so the oil hose could reach between the two ships. Once again, seeing George in such a hurry made the other tugs feel like they should be in a hurry too, and without even thinking about it, they began to vroom their engines and race around after George. Theodore was still trying to finish his sentence. "The most important thing is We have to be very careful. But George was still in too big a hurry to hear. Let's get these ships lined up, ordered George. Hank, move Igloo closer. Voduk, Theodore, hold Claire steady. Hurry, hurry! Before the two ships were even lined up side by side, George ordered the oil hose passed between them. Theodore could see the oil hose swaying and swinging between the two big ships as the tugs tried to get them lined up properly. Faster, frowned George as he gave Igloo a quick shove. I'm going as fast as I can, groaned Theodore. For one terrible moment, Theodore saw Igloo's oil hose stretch and stretch until it almost snapped. And then a funny thing happened. Theodore just turned off his engine and stopped. Theodore, shouted George, hurry up and help! We're not going fast enough!
George, we're going too fast,
Theodore said in a very quiet voice.
We've been going too fast all day.
Well, no one said anything. But they all knew Theodore was right. And suddenly George knew it too. Well, let's try it again, said George, slowing down his engine. And this time, I promise I won't hurry. The tugs all knew there wasn't much time left before Claire's oil started spilling into the ocean. But George wanted to make sure he didn't cause any more mistakes by rushing. Theodore, Voduk, move Claire ahead, George said calmly. Hank, hold Igloo steady there. Easy does it, he called. Take your time. Well, it seemed in no time at all the two big ships were lined up. Now, Claire could safely empty all her oil into Igloo. Later that night, the tugs took Claire to the repair dock. And they returned Igloo once again to the oil refinery. Finally, they began to make their way home. Look, said Hank, there's Blue Nose. And then another surprising thing happened. Hey, said George, slowing to a stop. He looked out across the peaceful evening. Has anyone ever noticed how beautiful Blue Nose is? Well, all Theodore and Hank could do was float there and smile. George always takes the time to do things right now. You know something? That's just what I'm going to do. There's plenty of time for me to get everything around here shipshape before the chief harbor master comes for his inspection. I don't need to hurry. Thanks for visiting us here in the big harbor. We'll see you all again next time. Now, you hurry back. Oh. I mean, take your time. Take your time.
Theodore, he's a tugboat and a friendly tugboat too. A friendly tugboat too. Oh, Theodore and Emily, Voduk, Hank and George and the harbor master too.